Welcome to Choosing to Be Chosen, the companion podcast to my new book of the same name, out February 2026. I'm here with Yehudah Pryce. How are you today?
Baruch Hashem, doing well. Yourself?
I'm good, and welcome to the neighborhood. You just moved to LA, Topeka Robertson.
Yeah.
From Irvine.
From Irvine, safest city in America. Been here for about a year now. Believe I'm acclimated, and I'm loving it. I love being around. The more Jews, the merrier. So,
and I just love this community because it's all different types of Jews. Like everyone here shul hops. We go from different synagogue, like one to another. So I'm a convert, obviously. My husband's Sephardic, but also I like Ashkenaz. So it's just everyone's a good mix.
Yeah, no, it is, right. And so I feel right at home as your typical Ashkenazi Jew.
Nice. And you're originally from OC, right? Or around there?
OC, though I like to say I grew up in OC, but I got into trouble in LA.
Nice.
Not Pico Robinson area, though.
I've interviewed you before. I know your story, but let's tell everyone because it's a very interesting story. So what part of LA or the OC are you originally from?
Garden Grove, which is on the border of Anaheim and Stanton.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was your childhood like?
My childhood, it was, I encountered some racism. I had to deal with some racism growing up, getting bullied because of it. I don't want to necessarily say that this was like the full, like all of my experience, but it happened enough where I really pointed to that and had a lot of sort of battles with self-esteem around that. And so I just remember being young, just really wanting to belong and fit in and, not stick out. I don't know if I'm doing a good job about that right now today, but at least back then, I definitely don't want to stick out. Yeah.
Did you have anyone you could talk to back then about it?
Not. I didn't have anybody that I felt comfortable with talking to. My biological father wasn't. He was in the picture where he'd come in and out, just depending, the sort of dynamics to a divorced parent trying to visit their child. But also I felt like his experience wasn't fully encapsulated in the Black American experience because he came from another country. So he couldn't necessarily understand, or at least that's what I felt as a kid. You assume a lot of things. So I don't want to say that that's fact or reality, but that's how I experienced it. I'm like, you're from Jamaica. What do you know about, the sort of dynamics of what it means to be a Black boy in American society? And so I didn't feel that he understood that. And so I didn't really have people I felt like I could connect with. My stepfather was white. My siblings were essentially white. And so I was, I really stood out. We'll say that.
And where's your mom from?
Sri Lanka.
Wow.
Yeah. She was born and raised a Muslim with her 9 siblings in Sri Lanka. And
how did they both end up in California?
I think it takes a special type of person and character to just say, I'm going to, leave the land of my ancestors and go to a new land where I don't know anybody. We talk about that, I think we just finished the parsha. Are we going on the parsha talking about Abraham, right? Yeah. And him just leaving. So yeah, we know it takes a lot. And so she just came because she wanted a different life. And a lot of times when you grow up in these sort of third world countries, opportunities are limited. Right? One of the reasons I'm never about, I need everything to be fair. I just need an opportunity. And I think I get that from my parents.
Yeah. And did she practice Islam when you were growing up?
She may have when I was like younger to know, but then eventually she had converted, at least for the sake of the marriage. There was Christianity in the home. Right now she ended up getting a divorce with my stepfather and she practices Islam right now to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So growing up, you were primarily exposed to Christianity then?
Yeah, Christianity. I don't like to say like I wasn't super religious. It kind of just was like, this was my cultural background and this is, wasn't a lot of JC talk. So I didn't know a lot about it, but I just identified it as my cultural reference point.
You did the holidays?
Did the holidays, yes. That's probably the main times we ended up going to church. Not to say that there wasn't any church visits before that, but we made sure for that at least. Yeah.
And did you believe in God?
Maybe in an abstract manner. Yeah, I believed in the concept of God. I don't know if I believed in God so much in that or maybe it was just based on, I didn't want to burn it for eternity, fear punishment. So at least if I say I believe, right? Obviously, I don't think I fully let it set in that there is an all-powerful entity that I should be obedient to and that my actions truly matter. I don't think that necessarily was something I really felt, but I think more so I was just fear of punishment.
What were the positive parts of your childhood?
Positive parts of my childhood. Well, I mean, generally speaking, I know I talk about the bullying, I talk about the racism, but I had fun, right? Like I feel like I am I like to joke around a lot. I like to have fun, and so I felt like that's what I brought along with my childhood. No matter what the sort of experience was, I was laughing, I was joking. Now, some people, now as a therapist, maybe it's a defense mechanism. But what I'm saying is, I think that's a part of my nature, and so I would, if we were talking about my childhood, I would just say I was a happy-go-lucky kid.
That's great.
At least at the initial stages of childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a good group of friends?
Yeah, probably not. Probably didn't have a good group of friends. I was always trying to fit in, and so I tended to go towards people who were getting in trouble. Mm-hmm. So maybe they were just getting in fights a lot, and then eventually it was the gang members because I fit in. There wasn't a sort of worrying about the sort of racial dynamics or what do I look like, and I had a mechanism to fit in more and to belong more, which was crime, mm-hmm. right? And so I do think there's a sort of bond and solidarity for people who are, committing crime together and going on sort of illegal missions. But I wouldn't translate that into any like significant or substantive friendships.
As a therapist looking back, was it kind of just you wanted camaraderie, you wanted friendship? Like
I wanted camaraderie and friendship, and I also think I was like an ideological criminal, meaning I didn't feel beholden to society's rules because I didn't like society's rules and I thought they were arbitrary. I didn't necessarily, even if we're talking about society, it's not like it's necessarily rooted in some sort of God's law or anything like that. It's made by man. And so I was a rebel, right? Sometimes they say there's a rebel without a cause. I think I was a rebel without a cause, but I just didn't like how the world worked. And I felt like I'm just going to do it myself. And not only that, like I remember looking at my parents and thinking like, oh, this is such a boring life. You go to work all day and you come back and then you got to take us ungrateful kids to all types of extracurricular activities, and then you go to sleep and you start over. And I don't know what sort of action and adventure I thought should be connected to adulthood, but it didn't impress me. I mean, now like it super impressed me just to be able to have a job and support your kids and do better for them. I think there's a lot to that, but back then it didn't impress me. So committing crime, it was cool. Not only that, like I was popular for it as well. So I actually found a sort of niche where I was popular and I had power. Like when you start exhibiting the capability of violence at a young age, and whether it's with guns, whether that's with friends and other gang members, that does give you some sort of power, at least in those realms that that you're operating in. And so it felt good not just to be seen and belong, but to have a sort of tangible power.
And you got into this in high school?
Before high school, probably around junior high, but I was young going into high school too. So my senior year, I was 16, mm-hmm. right? And so we're talking, 12, 13 years old.
Late birthday?
December, yeah.
Me too. What day?
17th.
12th.
Oh, 12.
My sister's is the 17th.
I should say, though, I do have a son that's born on the 13th, a mm-hmm. daughter born on the 15th, and another son born on the 16th of December. So
you're all fire signs in one house. That must be a lot.
There is a lot.
I once dated a Sagittarius. It was awful. I couldn't do Aries all the way.
Sometimes I get on my own nerves, so
But so you started doing crime. What kind of crime were you doing? And you said also violence. Were you beating people up?
Yeah. So crime, stealing was always a thing, even prior to me specifically taking a turn into this like full scale criminality. And yeah, we're talking about, I used to break into cars at night, sell the car stereos at the swap meet, because we had my friend's grandma was, we would do store runs. I would go into a store and pick up, let me get 15 size 30s, right, or whatever it was, and we just get them off at the swap meet. I ended up selling drugs, and I eventually landed on just robbing drug dealers for a living. That was like my main MO. And the fighting, yes, I got in fights. I actually tracked it. I forgot. I actually had a number. I don't know if it was 1.4 fights a week. I kept, at some point, I was real big on that. But I would say too, and maybe this is a partial rationalization, or at least the rationalization I used back then, which was I fought with other gang members and people who claimed to be thugs or drug dealers. So I felt like we're all part of the same sort of subculture. This is what we're supposed to be all about. So you signed up for this, so be it. And I'm known to have a competitive nature to myself. I was very argumentative at some point too, as well, and so that sort of confrontational thing was expressed through fights back then.
And robbing other drug dealers, would you give it to the little people? Like, you know,
I might give deals to the little people, right? Like specific, wholesale deals or something like that. But I didn't do it for some benevolent cause or anything like that, right? Like I'm trying to help the community stay drug free or anything like that. I sold it at discount, right? And not only that, it was like it was two things. I had told I never robbed anybody I personally knew, right? Because I have morals. But I'm being facetious with a lot of saying, but I didn't rob anybody I knew. But it was one of those things where I didn't want to be known as a person that stabs their friends in the back. Right? There was a different type of criminality. Even when you get locked up, there's a difference between somebody who robs somebody and somebody who steals. Right? And you look down on the people who are trying to be sneaky and get away, or con, or anything like that. But yeah, I mean. I was all about the fighting. I was all about all that, and I was all about the selling drugs. And what I would do is I would tell my friends to say that either, I say friends very loosely, that either you could tell people that were trying to buy drugs, or you could tell people that were selling drugs. So if they came to buy drugs, I robbed them for the money. If they came to sell drugs, I robbed them for the drugs. So that's the little scheme I worked out.
When you get into it, do the crimes get more and more extreme?
Yeah, I would say the crimes got more extreme because, you know, what they say is you do one mitzvah, it leads to another mitzvah, but you do one avera, it leads to another avera. And, you know, human beings, like, we have to get acclimated to be able to do, you know, more and more stuff, right? And the more I was around crime, the more I was willing to do. So, you know, there was a lot. I'm not gonna get into too deeply on camera, at least. But yeah, I mean, it was just a lot more easy. But I was I was getting into it with other gang members, right? When I was 16 years old, my whole family was in our house when it got shot up, right? My mother's vehicle's been shot up. Like, people were actively trying to kill me, right, as a kid, and I was actively trying to retaliate and you know, do what I do. And so yeah, that was the sort of dynamics as a teenager.
Did your mom kick you out of the house at that point?
My mom didn't kick me out at that point. One, because how can I be blamed for my own house getting shot up, right? That's, you know, I always often painted myself as the innocent victim, at least to my mom, right? You don't. I felt like I respected my mom to her face, meaning my actions didn't necessarily align with that respect away from her, where people go like, "Oh yeah, he was raised by a good mom," but I try to be respectful to her face, and then explain away whenever I got in trouble. Oh, they're just, you know, I use the race card a lot. It's because I'm black. They pull me over to black. Never mind that I'm selling drugs and I got weapons and all. That's besides the point. And she often seen law enforcement go to great lengths to try to get me for what crime. And yeah, some of it was like fluffed up and they seemed to be going all the way, but the sort of other story to that is that they knew I was for sure getting away with all sorts of other crimes, and I was like selling drugs and I was doing this, and they just had no way to pin it on me or, you know, link me to it. So yeah, that's what's going on.
During this point in your life, did you have any hope for your future?
So I didn't necessarily think about the future like that, meaning I don't know how I had my existential crisis when I was younger, like 8 or something like that. But if your memories are caught up in, like, are part of your brain and your brain dies, I looked at it as, if I die now or 20 years from now, what does it matter? Right? Like, I won't know I missed out in 20 years. So that wasn't, you know, super compelling about a future, right? My thing was just to have fun. You know, you live fast, you die young, but you have fun while you're doing it. And who wants to be old anyway? I do, but back then I couldn't imagine that. Yeah.
Did you have any good role models you looked up to during this time?
So I think there were people they're eligible to be role models, meaning it wasn't like I grew up where there was no capable men or anybody that I could like seek to emulate. I think I had issues with authority, adult figures, and I just was overall distrustful of having close relationships with people. Probably, you know, those were my friends who shot up my mother's residence, right? I've had friends try to rob, you know, so-called friends, quote unquote friends, right? So, and I also didn't necessarily have anybody that I just felt connected to. So perhaps there were role models, but I never experienced another adult figure as that role model. Yeah.
And then I know you got caught at a certain point. So how old were you when you got caught, and what went down?
So I got caught many times as a juvenile. I was in and out of juvenile hall. I during my high school year caught multiple cases. Went to trial before too. But eventually, I graduated at 17. Ended up catching a case right soon after I graduated, and I was in juvenile hall camp for about a year. Got out 18 and a half or so, and then when I was 19, I was arrested for multiple firearms and a home invasion robbery. And I was eventually sentenced to, nobody was hurt in the crime. I don't say that to minimize anything, but just so you know, like I didn't shoot up a whole bunch of people or something like that, right? And I got 4 years for the robbery, and I got 20 years in enhancements, right? And so at age 19, I had to start conceptualizing, being incarcerated for longer than I've been alive, right? So,
what was it, the feeling like in that moment?
I think I was good at erecting my defense mechanisms, meaning, well, in one thing I had that sort of false hope, or I don't know what type of hope you would want to call it, but where maybe some sort of appeal and I'll get out, right? But also I think it's sort of that ideological part to it. I felt like I'm a gangster. If you claim to be something, if you claim to be committed to something, then the consequences shouldn't deter you from that. So the fact that I claim to be a gangster and now, I got sentenced to a quarter century in prison, and they're sending me to the maximum security level 4 180 Pelican Bay State Prison. I am being authentic to my identity, and to me, it was all about being authentic to who you were, or who you claimed to be, or who you were trying to be authentic to that, and I was, and so I assuaged whatever sort of trepidation or regret by just digging deeper into the sort of persona that I had cultivated.
Was that normal for people who didn't hurt anyone to go to a maximum security prison?
So at least back then it was, meaning I know we look at California, you might be like, oh no, they're going to be good on like criminal justice reform and all that, right? But we went from 4 prisons in the 70s, I believe, to like 30 something now, right? And so there was this big streak of locking people up. And so, and back then it was, you lock somebody up for as long as possible. That was the strategy. So those gang enhancements, like I actually faced a life sentence, and the judge literally articulated that, look at, I don't have a lot of reasons not to do this, right? But I'm just going to say you're young and you're smart, and so I'm only going to give you 24 years. You're not going to be happy, and the district attorney's not going to be happy, right? Because the district attorney was trying to give me up to 30 years, 8 months to life, right? And so, which is hard to kind of fathom, because I'm thinking like, how is a life so expendable that for a property crime, and again, I don't want to minimize it, but I'm just thinking of the value of a possible second chance, that you can just take away somebody's life for that long, with the understanding, right? Because I believe in law and order, right? I truly believe in law and order, and I have children of my own, and I take part in the community, and I truly believe it. But there wasn't a real mechanism at the time for rehabilitation. So it was just incarcerate a person for a significant amount of time, and then we're going to let you back out, and you're probably going to go back to prison, but hey, right? And so, yeah, but even so, when I got sentenced at that time too, and this is why I kind of, I don't want to equivocate, I want to be careful how I describe it, but at the time, I felt like I was the victim, right? Which I'm not, but this is the sort of immature mindset back then, and I felt like, well, they shouldn't have given me all this time, and this, instead of saying like at the end of the day, well, I shouldn't have been committing crime, right? Like, so I used to blame, because my co-defendant, what did he do? What's the vernacular they use? He snitched on me. That's the vernacular, right? And if you ask me why I was in prison, I'd be like, well, my crime, my co-defendant snitched on me. That's why, right? Instead of me thinking like, well, if I was a real friend, would I have been helping in any possible way somebody commit a crime, right? Like I wish somebody claimed to be my friend and called me up and talked about let's commit a crime. Obviously, we're not friends. You don't care about me, right? But yeah, so I had a problem with accepting responsibility. I had a problem with being a friend, as I just described. I had a problem of just being a productive member of society, right? But at that time, I didn't think about that, and I had no regrets, and I was just, again, I just doubled down on who I thought I was, which was a gangster.
Was this around the time that gangs were a bigger deal than they are now? Because it seems like maybe in the 90s or something, or early 2000s, like gangs were running more rampant. Like now, I don't even hear about it.
So as a social worker, I'm definitely in proximity to parts of society that are heavily connected to gangs. I would say there's been a big crackdown on gangs. So maybe the early 90s was its heyday, and I think if you look at the crime statistics, probably was. Mm-hmm. But I would say gang membership and gangs have become more mainstream now, and so I would actually say that gang lifestyle or culture in some way or another permeates more of America than it did, in the 90s. Though in the 90s it might have been just more, egregious violence you would see, and then it was something new too, right? Bloods, Chris, what was going on, right? But now it's mainstream. Now I just turn on the radio station, and you'll hear kids singing along to what they hear on the radio station, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, why would they do all these enhancements, or is it because of the prisons became profitable? Like, what is your theory on why?
So actually, I don't think it has anything to do with the prisons being profitable. So my doctoral capstone was actually connected to smart decarceration, which is one of the 13 grand challenges of social work, which is essentially, do we need to have this many people locked up? Right, but we also have to need to be concerned about public safety. So this is not just abolitionists, let everybody out of prison, right? And so they examined it, and the profit wasn't the big. You didn't see those particular counties or places that had private prisons have a higher rate or anything that's indicative of that. The one would just think. Mm-hmm. So that's not the issue. Not only that, I would just tell you, anybody that's in California would pretty much say, well, the private prisons are a little bit cleaner. Mm-hmm. Right, like they're like, it's not the sort of situation. It's actually the United States Supreme Court who ruled California prisons to both be so severely overcrowded that it constituted cruel and unusual punishment. Was essentially that's aimed at what the state facilities are more than anything else, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that. I think talking about crime, it's easy to get an emotional response from people, right? I have children. I want to keep them safe, right? Mm-hmm. If you're telling me somebody is committing crime with no regards to innocent civilians, right? I'm going to say lock them up and throw it away the key. At least that's going to be my emotional reaction, mm-hmm. right? And so at least when I talk about it, I don't talk about it as what some people may say, flippantly hug a thug or anything like that, where, hey, right? But you need to have mechanisms for rehabilitation, because 90% of people who get incarcerated are going to return back to society. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, who do you want as your neighbor? Somebody mm-hmm. that went to Pelican Bay State Prison and just hung around gang members and would just punish them as much as possible, and now they're moving in as your neighbors, right? Like, I don't want that, right? I actually frame it as community members with an incarceration experience, because at the ultimate day, ultimately, there are people from our society, through their own choices, they led there, but, how do we want our community to be? They're going to come back, right? And not only that, they leave their family, children, right? This disrupts so many systems, and I don't necessarily think it leads to the public safety we want, mm-hmm. Which is, again, I got a quarter century in prison, right? Definitely was a bad guy. I'll tell you that much, right? And so I'm not saying I didn't deserve to be incarcerated, but again, I think there needs to be some sort of pathways to genuine rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm. What was it like when you were behind bars?
Being incarcerated in a maximum security prison, you're surrounded by, some of the worst of society, right? I'm talking about rehabilitation, right? I'm saying, and I'm not an abolitionist, just let everybody out, because I know there's some people like, no, you can stay right there. Like, you're gonna have to learn a lot before because I've seen it. So you see, like, the worst society. Not only that, it's ruled by gangs, and it's racial. It's everything's, if I worried about racism, I can't even, people getting stabbed from being a different color, right? Like it was serious, and you could only associate and eat with people of your own race. And there was this, I've seen a lot of violence, and the situation was, and it's different when you're put in a situation where you wake up and all right, due to what's going on right now, you may die, and you can't run anywhere, right? That is something to the human psyche to be faced in like this sort of circumstances, and then have nowhere to go but just be in it. And for that to happen so frequently, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to deal with, right? But what we do is, at least what a lot of men do in that particular is like you just try to be as tough as possible. It's that I don't say hyper masculinity in the sort of trendy way you say it, but I say it knowing of the sort of circumstances where violence is the language that people universally, not just people universally understand, but people respect and admire, right? That's the sort of environment it was. And it got to the point where I told my family to stop visiting me, at least when I was in Pelican Bay State Prison. It was a rough situation, right? I don't want to say I was fearful. There were situations where I didn't know, I feared dying, yes, for sure, or being in a situation where I have to do something and now I got a life sentence, right? Because a lot of people there had life. My first cellmate had like 30 years to life, right? Like, and so it was just a rough situation, right? And it really tests your resolve, and it really, I think, ultimately, all things considered now, right? I became a man in prison. That's what the situation did to me. And
at what point did you discover Judaism?
So this was actually in Pelican Bay State Prison. I would say this is after I kind of, I realized I professed to believe in something, and I felt like I don't know what I am professing to believe in. And so I started examining my religion, and I immediately almost rejected it. Like, there's no way I could believe in this. And I started examining other religions. I read, I read the Quran front to back. I've read other sort of religious scriptures, and I was really, and I would argue with people. Because again, I was still confrontational, and I would argue with people because I thought truth mattered. And if you're going to base your life on this truth, let's examine it a little bit, right? And so maybe it wasn't always a quest of truth. Maybe it wasn't always a quest for truth, though I believe ultimately it was. I say it wasn't always because I felt like a lot of it was me just being confrontational and challenging, and being the what we call a sort of pre-internet troll. Right. And I don't say this with any sort of delight. Right. Like this, I say it like, like, what was I thinking? Why would I have to be that jerk? Right. There's always that person that always wants to just challenge you for like, just do you and I'll do me. Right. That's all it has to be. But yeah, so I examined this religion, all these religions, and I concluded that I wasn't an atheist, because, to me, being an atheist is taking a leap of faith. You have to be sure that God doesn't exist. Right? That's the same as somebody believing God. But not only that, like I feel like one way is a sort of cynical orientation, right, and one's a more optimistic orientation, right? And so I wasn't in optimistic circumstances, but I wasn't a cynic in that way. I wasn't a pessimist, right? Like I said, I was just happy-go-lucky, joking sort of guy. So that never was really a part of my personality. But I was agnostic, and I thought religion was, it was something people used to manipulate for power, right? And that's what I concluded. And so what ended up happening is they hired a reformed rabbi at Pelican Bay State Prison, and my friend told me about it, and essentially I was invited to go argue with this rabbi, but by my friend, not that the rabbi wanted me to go argue with him. And so I went there. I went to go argue with him. And I didn't know anything about the denominations. What's Reform? What's Orthodox? A Jew, right? And that's what the situation was. And I went there, and he said, well, first of all, I just immediately, you think you have the only way to God and this is that. He's like, no, no, we don't actually. Just be a good person, right? And I went, so I'm like, oh, okay. I'm used to this sort of used cars man sales pitch, right? You gotta do this is the best ever, and this and that. It's the only way, right? How you gonna, so I didn't get that. I got like be a good person, right? And obviously there's more to that. Like, we believe there's 7 specific things more than that, but or 7 in total. But he said that, and that resonated with me some, right? And I also would say at the time I don't know how many years I had been a vegan. I was an animal activist vegan. I just felt like one day I just woke up and was like, you know what? They got these animals locked up in cages. Look, if they didn't do nothing to me, I'm not gonna do nothing to them, right? So I'm not an animal activist, but I was just like, I'm just gonna leave them alone. They're gonna leave me alone, right? And so when he had mentioned that, he had mentioned that at least the ideal at the beginning of creation was that everybody was essentially vegan, right? It wasn't really after the flood that we were allowed to eat flesh as a sort of concession to man's desires, right? And so when he said that, I'm like, oh, like sort of first, I guess, conception of morality I had, which was an easier, even more abstract conception of morality because it didn't have to do with me and other people. It had me to do with animals who weren't around, right? Besides in food form, right? Like I'm in prison, right? And so I'm like, oh, and this is connected. Wow, like, right? And I just realized I hadn't really examined Judaism except through what other people told me about Judaism. It's kind of like today, right? Everybody's an expert on what Jews are, what Judaism is. I'm like, who do you, like, how do you know the whole history? Like,
the Talmud. Everyone on X knows the Talmud.
Yeah. I'd be like, all right, can you cite the passage and the commentary with that?
Takes 7 years to read, but you did it in a day.
Over 5,000 some pages, and it's in another language, right? Tell me about it. Let's talk, right? But still doesn't matter, right? Like people love telling Jews about what Jews are, what they think, what they believe, what their origins and all that, right? And I realized that I didn't know much. And I mean, and if anything, I mean, this wasn't me saying that, oh, I want to know more about the religion, because it was more like I just felt like I had a sort of knowledge base of religions and I didn't know about this. So I went to go I wanted to learn more. Once I recognized that I didn't have firm footing in a debate, because I didn't really know how, they say you have to know something to really be able to argue or debate against it, right? And so I didn't really have a lot of sort of angles besides attacking it through like other religions, right? But other religions don't necessarily represent this, else they wouldn't exist, right? Like, so I didn't know the sort of source. And the rabbi says something essentially that Judaism, you don't have to believe this, Judaism works for the Jewish people, right? And he actually started giving me books. Like he might have built the Jewish library at the prison by buying those books for me to first read, but then he didn't buy it for me, but he bought, hey, read this, and now it's part of the library. And just really contemplating on it, even talking about how I just mentioned how I would only be able to critique Judaism prior to me knowing about Judaism is through the lens of other religions. But that, even connecting to that, as I started reading more and more, right, I thought about what the rabbi said, and essentially I'm gonna add to it, is that I thought about it. You had this people who had a perception of God. If we think about Har Sinai and the Revelation, and that's what these other sort of religions that everybody believe, right? And so the small minority of people, because of that, not just the perception, that relationship dynamic they have between God, right, and the Masorah and the mitzvahs, Masorah in the tradition, they essentially influence billions of people in the whole Western world into the Jewish conception of God, of morality, of the foundational values, right? Like, I mean, that's massive, right? And so you had a perception of this relationship with God, and then they just brought the goal wasn't like, look, we better get rich off this. We're gonna be booming. This is what it's about, right? No, it was like we're spreading this morality, right? And at the end of the day, we're connected to Shem, connected to God, right? We're doing the mitzvahs in the world, and persecuted mercilessly, unrelenting for thousands of years, right? Like in every era, right? People are like, oh, it's not gonna have nothing in America. Then you look around like, oh wow, so many of my neighbors hated me. Like they say, one of the dimensions of the trauma for if we're thinking about the Holocaust, was, yes, the atrocities that the Nazis did, right? But also, when the Nazis was going to different sort of towns and villages, the Jews' neighbors were just so willing to slaughter them and turn against them and turn them in, right? Like that's like wow. Like, and then post October 7th, we still kind of see. I'm not saying, anybody's attempted to slaughter me or anything like that, right? But they have attempted to slaughter other people. It's harassment. What the online space is. Online space, like I don't think people even have an inkling, if they're not Jewish, to understand like the sort of like the sort of venom, right? And it's not just there, it's in real life. These are real people. It's not just bots. A lot of bots, but it's real people, and you just see it, and you see it being mainstreamed right there, right? But it's weird. Like, you look at, my neighbors, so many of them, I got good neighbors too, but so many of them don't like me, and they got these weird views about what they know what Jews are and what Judaism is, and how nefarious in Israel and this and that. So, but with that argument, specifically thinking about the Jewish people having a conception of God, entering this relationship, changing the world, and then being persecuted relentlessly, but still managing to maintain that mission, right? Think about whole world, generally, broadly speaking, right? I'm not being specific, but like so much of the whole world at different times hating you, and your mission still is your mission, right? To make the world a better place. Like, that's the mission. God gave me the mission. I'm still on the mission, right? They can hate me. They can hate me. It is what it is. Yeah. But they were able to maintain that mission, maintain the religion, maintain the tradition, maintain the family structures, the communal structures, and disproportionately positively affect every single society they ever been in, right? And to me, if you were going to argue if something is emis, is real, is connected to a higher power or to some ultimate, that is the story that does it for me, right? That is the story that does it for me, right? Brought God into this world. Billions of people think about God and have adopted this God as their God in a real foundational sense, and the morality and the values in Western culture. And then we have free will choice to really own. To own our actions and what happens in this world, and not just being controlled by some powers or anything like that. Like, I think it really motivated me to want to know this God of the Jews, right? And I think so. I just started like reading voraciously because the rabbi would give it to me. And the first book he actually gave me was To Be a Jew, which is a book on Orthodoxy. I just started falling in love. So I taught myself how to read Hebrew so I could pray, because I wanted to have a relationship with God.
It gave you hope. Finally, it sounds like you had hope.
I wouldn't even say hope, right? If not only that, like I would think, like, I don't know what was, to me, it wasn't like, I didn't care at that point. So it wasn't like I was like, my story is not a story of like I hit rock bottom. I was in rock bottom hanging out, right? Saying we're hanging. I was hanging with the homies on rock bottom. Like, that's what it was. So it wasn't this like deep despair or depression, or it wasn't that sort of situation. I was ideological criminal, so it wasn't the greatest of experience, but nonetheless, I took pride in the identity. This didn't give me hope. This just gave it gave me a purpose that I thought wasn't just some cause, right? It was a purpose I thought that was tied to the ultimate purpose of living and being in this world. And so that's what it gave me. And so I was connected to that, not necessarily thinking what would happen to me. I still might die, get life in prison. Like, that's my reality, right? But I found, and so to me wanting to be Jewish had nothing to do with the Jew. I can't say it had nothing to do with the Jewish people, but me wanting to be the Jewish wasn't primarily motivated by the Jewish people, because I didn't know Jews.
Had you ever met one Jew in your life?
Not that I was,
aside from the rabbi.
Yeah, not that I was consciously aware of. Yeah. Right. Like, so I hadn't. So what did I know about it, right? This wasn't motivated by, don't get me wrong, now, I'm out and I know the community, man, Orthodox Jewish communities do community like no other community does community, right? To be, right? Like, it's like, it's a life, right? It's a very rich and rewarding life, something that I never experienced, especially when everybody's so concerned about, not everybody, but there's a thrust in mainstream society that the individual, awesome, the individual, right? Because everybody's individually, made in the image of Hashem. But but the community where a people were one, what, that hits different when you're actually doing that, right? But so and I ended up transferring from that prison to a lower security prison, and they had another Reform rabbi working there, and I ended up becoming like the lead Jewish chapel clerk for him. And it was actually at that prison that I decided, like, I got to go to the Orthodox route, because everything I everything that I've said speaks about a certain revelation, sort of perception and relationship with God, with that source, and that source which created Jewish identity. Jewish identity doesn't exist without this sort of Masorah, with that origin story connected to God.
Yeah, you're talking about that we believe that God gave us the Torah.
That God gave us the Torah, but I'm doing it in terms of, because sometimes, I know me, if I'm very argumentative about religion, I argue in particular ways, but I think if you can go deeper to that and just think about it. God gave us the Torah. We were able to he revealed himself to us, and we were able to perceive it. And we chose to enter into a relationship with God, the source that animates all of existence, right? The source of all being, right? We chose that. So out of that Torah, that Masorah, which is our tradition that has been meticulously handed down from generation to generation, an unbroken chain going back thousands of years. It started with the indigenous religion of Eretz Israel is like, that's a transmission like no other, right? Does anybody, like, you can't do so? It's so deep that so many other peoples try to get their origin stories from our books. They don't have any independent, right? It comes through, right? It's and that sort of tradition, and right, and so that Masorah, which is God wills manifest, it's the Torah, it's everything expressed and what we have been believing and showing up in the world as, right? What does it mean to be, right? Is all your thoughts, your values, your connection, your stories, or all that, and you acting upon that in a meticulous manner like Jews do, right? Like that Masorah, that's what made Jews, that's what sustained Jews, and I wanted part of that, because that's where I saw God. And so I had decided while in prison that when I get out, I wanted to convert, become an Orthodox Jew. And
you met your wife around this time? I know you met online.
Oh, yeah. My wife. I don't mean it like that. My wife, right? Rookie Shem for my wife. I met my wife on my illegal contraband cell phone when I was in prison. Met her on Instagram. And randomly, it wasn't like I was like, hey, it was like a random sort of situation. But she was because she was Jewish too. That's part of it, right? Because if you're Jewish, it's not like, hey, I love Judaism. It's the greatest. It means so much. Whatever. But yeah, you do whatever you want, right? Yeah. Or it's like, no, look, I love it. I want my kids. I want connection. This Masorah, boom, bam. And so when I seen this like beautiful woman with she had a flag of Israel behind her and this and that, like, we just followed each other. It was like a regular Instagram thing. But it turned out when we just finally started commenting with each other that soon as we just had like a regular conversation, again, I'm in prison. She's in Vancouver, Canada. We just hit it off. Like a week after meeting her, I knew like she was the one. And I was with her for, I think inside that prison, I was with her for years. She would visit me like once a year in person. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, it was a situation. And when she met me, I had like 9 years left to do in prison. But then they ended up passing a law. I referenced it. Well, I referenced the cause of that law, which was that the United States Supreme Court determined California prisons were so severely overcrowded that it constituted cruel and unusual punishment, because there was like medical issues going on, and people were dying because of that. And so they passed a law: if the crime was committed under the age of 23, you're eligible for early parole hearing. That doesn't mean you're getting out. It just means that show me what you've done, and we'll consider with the, based on the crime, based on your plans and all that. And so I ended up getting out early. So I didn't do 24 years. Like they say, when people ask, did you do that? I said, no, I was a short timer, just did a little bit over 16 years, right? And that was the situation. I got out in 2018. And after that, I got out in 2018. went on one, got my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate, social work, became a licensed clinical social worker, was able to, marry my wife. Now we're, living down the street with 4 children.
You converted first, while you were doing school.
Yeah, for sure.
So you did 3 degrees, and you became a Jew.
And like the real, like you said, my doctorate. Yeah, it's all right. But that going through a garret, an Orthodox conversion, right? Because you're coming, like it's essentially you're becoming part. You're becoming part of a tribe, part of a people. It's not just a set of things that you memorize, right? It's assimilating into the people, right? And it takes a lot. So it takes, yes, the knowledge, but it takes you just living a life that you hadn't been living before, right?
Yeah. And your wife's Baal Tshuva.
She
came back. You brought her back.
Yeah. She grew up in a religious household.
Yeah.
But like many of us, when we're young, we make our decisions, right? And sometimes we just need to experience life. I'm not saying everybody just needs to do whatever they want, but Hashem has a plan for people, right? And I think my wife is one of many examples of, at the end of the day, if you take a couple steps towards Hashem, He runs towards you. Right. And Baruch Hashem, like she's, and not only that, not only is she's, deep in it now, she's the Jewish woman is the foundation of the home. Right. And so my kids, everything, like it's Baruch Hashem that Hashem blessed me, an ideological criminal or whatever you want to call it. Right. With, the other half of my soul while I was locked up in prison, and I get to live a life with her and my family. It's, like I never thought of a future. But now that I have this future, I can't believe, I was doing anything else but this right now, right? Which was being a Jew and, being connected to my family and being connected to my community and being connected to the cloud, right? Because we're connected from here to Eretz Israel. That's what it is.
Looking back, you see all the miracles.
I see major, massive miracles. And I look at it as just Hashem having a father's infinite compassion and mercy on me for something that I don't deserve.
Do you have an inspirational message for our listeners?
Inspirational message. I got an advisory message. Don't go to prison. Keep it out of aim. Listen to your moms. Listen to your dads, and it'll be all right. But on another message, right? You want to throw some messages out there. I'm speaking to my Jew partners out there. Is we have the most transformational, impactful, positive tradition ever to grace this earth by far. That's not even a brag, right? That's a responsibility. Right? You have that. That's a beautiful treasure, right? All I'm saying is, in whatever way you do, actively, intentionally connect with that. Connect with Hashem.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Yehudah.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.